I'm Sara Goldvine, and this is Let's Talk Housing, a podcast by BC Housing. In this space, we explore the complex systemic issues that make it challenging for many people in British Columbia to access and afford a home. The provincial government has an ambitious plan with the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with helping deliver on this plan is BC Housing, which is working with hundreds of partners to develop, manage, and administer a wide range of affordable housing and homelessness services in hundreds of communities across the province. In this podcast, you'll hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm Sara Goldvine. Like any complex issue, housing requires a team approach. And this one requires the involvement of many different levels of government. Today's guests know this very well. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am recording from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We offer respect to their peoples, past and present. Joining us today on Let's Talk Housing are the mayors of two of the largest municipalities of British Columbia, both of which have been leading the response to complex housing challenges. Lisa Helps is retiring in October of 2022 after serving 8 years as Mayor of Victoria, the capital of British Columbia. Lynn Hall will be retiring as Mayor of Prince George after more than 20 years as an elected representative in various aspects of Prince George's local government, including 2 terms as mayor. In full transparency, we are recording this episode in early September 2022, and the conversation reflects the issues at that time. Of note, this episode is being recorded prior to the municipal elections in British Columbia, and so both mayors are leading their respective municipalities. Mayor Helps, Mayor Hall, welcome to Let's Talk Housing.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Now, I'd like to start off just by giving our listeners a bit of an understanding about your communities and also the particular housing challenges that your communities face. Mayor Helps, can you explain to us a little bit about Victoria, the municipality that you lead?
Before I answer your question, I'll just begin with an acknowledgement of the homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And we work closely with both nations as we walk a path of truth and reconciliation together. So the housing challenges in Victoria are no different than the housing challenges of any other city in this country. We are short on housing for everyone, whether we have young professionals, working professionals who make good salaries, who could afford to buy a townhome or a unit in a houseplex, but there aren't any. So there's not enough what's called missing middle housing. We have students. There's not enough housing for them. There's not enough purpose-built rental for people who are moving to Victoria for work, don't want to buy or can't buy right away. And we don't have enough supportive housing for people who need a little bit of extra support in addition to some financial subsidy. And we don't have enough housing for people with really complex needs who are left out on our street. So across the housing ecosystem, there's a lot of work to do.
Mayor Hall, of course, Prince George is located quite a ways away from Victoria, right smack in the middle of the province, well north of Victoria. Can you tell us a little bit about Prince George and how much of what Mayor Helps is referring to resonates for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to recognize, Sarah, that I'm on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh First Nations and have a strong partnership and working relationship with them, and certainly want to pass along my thanks to Lheidli T'enneh. You know, it's interesting, despite the size of Prince George and perhaps the difference in size between us and cities across the province, we're a city of about 80,000 people, but we have the same issues here in Prince George as we would have, as Mayor Helps has just explained and laid out the situation in Victoria. We have a tremendous amount of need for all levels of housing. We have just gone through and continue to go through a building boom here in Prince George. So that means an escalation in house prices, an escalation in condo development prices, and it just goes on and on and on. We have been fortunate in a couple of circumstances where we have had the private sector step in and provide some very, very good student housing opportunities for students that are coming to UNBC and to the College in New Caledonia. But I think really our focus as a municipality has been on a variety of housing needs, but in particular around supportive housing. We have a tremendous amount of people who require supports, and that's the work that's being done not only between the municipality and other municipalities in the province, but also the provincial government, federal government, BC Housing. So we still are lacking in a number of areas. And I think the important thing for us is Prince George is really the hub of the North. And we are called on all the time to provide various services to people throughout the entire northern part of the province.
You've touched on so much there, Mayor Hall. I'm wondering, you've been involved in a lot of this work for decades. What do you think has really changed since you first became involved with municipal politics around housing?
I think what has changed is the people expect the municipality to step up and take a leading role. And I'm quick to talk about sort of the jurisdictional differences between organizations. And I think what's really changed in my mind is that partnership approach between the health authority, the provincial and federal government. That has something that I've seen, quite honestly, a drastic change over the last number of years. It wasn't always that way. And we continue to say, we're prepared to lead, but we need you at the table because you're the ones with the responsibility to provide much of what we're after, which is supportive housing and housing at all levels, quite honestly.
And what about you, Mayor Helps? What do you think has changed for you in the time that you've been involved with municipal politics?
One of the things that's changed, most recently, I would say, is the toxic drug supply, the level of addiction and drug overdose that we see, and overdose deaths for sure. That's obviously a part of a housing issue, but equally importantly, because of the toxic drug supply, people are overdosing, they're being revived, and then they are living with significant brain injury in some cases. And there is absolutely no housing with appropriate level of care and support for those people. And they're the ones oftentimes who get kicked out of supportive housing or people with mental health challenges because of aggression or violence or setting fires to their rooms or whatever it is. And they're the first to get evicted. And those are the folks who end up on our streets. And so I think I've really witnessed kind of a disintegration of care and support for people who are so vulnerable. And no matter how much housing we build, unless we put the care and support around those folks and build the kind of housing that they're going to want to move into, they're going to be back on our streets. And I would say I've witnessed the real travesty of the toxic drug supply and its impact on our streets, particularly, I would say, over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and Mayor Hall, I can see you nodding along to a lot of that. Now, Prince George, and you touched on this briefly, your city's been really involved with this integrated approach to health. Can you talk a little bit about the integrated health model and how that's helping?
Yeah, and Mayor Helps brings up a good point around the toxic supply, the need for complex care. We have a prolific offender issue on our streets throughout the province. We went to work about 2.5-3 years ago to look at establishing an integrated health model, which would really provide services on site for people that are being impacted with mental illness, people who are impacted with drug addiction. And I really think that when I look at that particular model, which has us signing a MOU with the Northern Health Authority, with BC Housing, that particular facility for me is really, I think, an add-on to what we have been trying to do here in Prince George for a number of years. It's a tremendous amount of work, but I think at the end of the day, I'm hoping that it will deliver to those folks certainly the medical needs that they have as a result of mental illness, as a result of what they are going through from a opioid addiction perspective. And I think it will help. It's been a long process. It's been a struggle at times, but I think we're nearing the point in time where we're going to start to see shovels in the ground at some point in the next, I'm hoping, in 2023. And for us, that was really a significant approach it shows a strong partnership between the three organizations, and I think that I'm hoping that will lend some hope to other municipalities that are looking at strengthening those partnerships.
And if you think about those other municipalities who might be looking to Prince George and your approach as a model, what advice would you have for them around the role of a municipality in bringing orders of government together?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the municipality does not provide housing. We don't provide health care, but we're certainly prepared to step to the plate. And I think that's the role municipalities are very, very good at, is stepping to the plate and taking a leadership role and trying to bring those other agencies together to try to develop these kinds of programs and these kinds of facilities. But I think everybody has to know whose responsibility is whose. And quite often I will have conversations with members of my community that would talk about the need for us as a municipality to get involved in the housing business. And that's just, in my opinion, that is too difficult. It's impossible, but we can certainly be at the table to provide that leadership.
Yeah. And Mayor Helps, I'd like to bring you in here as well, because certainly Victoria is another municipality that is providing some leadership, including around rapid deployment of affordable housing. And of course, I'm assuming you were up fairly late last night managing some debates at council around some of these issues. Can you tell us a little bit about what Victoria has underway to deploy that housing rapidly?
Sure. The Victoria Council, after I was elected, convened in 2015 a community conversation task force to develop a strategy for affordable housing. And we did it in 2 phases. And so we're now in phase 2 of our housing strategy. And it really does, as Mayor Hall says, local governments can't build housing, although we do have a capital regional housing corporation. So at a regional level, we're building housing together. But we can do a whole range of things that are within our own authority. And that's really where our housing strategy has been focused across the housing ecosystem, from supportive housing all the way through to missing middle housing, which is what we were here till 12:26 a.m. last night. And at noon today, we're going to continue our debate on that topic. And so we've tried to say, what is our own authority and how can we use that more effectively? And so there are 2 things, well, 3 things really that I'll point out. One is the rapid deployment of affordable housing. And what that is a policy that council has passed to allow for, as of right, so without the need for rezoning, affordable housing anywhere within the city limits, as long as it's owned and or run by government, a nonprofit, or co-op housing. And as long as the land somewhere already has multi-unit residential in it. So there's no need for a big political process. There's no need for a public hearing. It's simply, basically, we've rezoned the city to allow for affordable housing. So that just happened in April. We'll see how that rolls out. The second thing we did in our villages and corridors planning is pre-zoned or will pre-zone a whole swath of the city for rental housing. So if you're building rental, fill your boots. You have to fit with the design guidelines, but you can just build. Again, no political process. And as part of that, we've provided extra density if you're going to build affordable rental housing. And then the most contentious one, which we're right in the middle of right now, is missing middle housing. And that is essentially to rezone the entire city to allow for houseplexes and townhouses where only single family homes can go. And so those are some of our big moves. But like Mayor Hall, we're also working closely with the federal and provincial governments, particularly the provincial governments, to make sure that we've got the supportive housing at the low end of the market as well.
I mean, I think that, the projects that you've mentioned show the complexity of housing, right? And really the interrelationship between housing and healthcare and so many other issues that show up in our communities. So by the time this podcast airs, both of you will be retired from your current roles and somebody else will be sitting in the mayor's seat. I'd love to end just by getting your thoughts on what advice you would have for the incoming mayors in your municipalities. Mayor Hall, can we start with you?
Boy, what a loaded question, Sarah. I'm sure Lisa and I could go on for an hour or two to talk about this. For me, it's, and I said I would never give any advice, but here's what it was for me. I think if you're looking at gaining a seat around the council table, gaining the mayor's chair, at the end of the day, you need to be prepared for everything that's going to come at you. And there is no one thing that is going to, I think, that is going to be constant. But if I could impart perhaps a little bit of advice, this topic around housing, the need for housing, the need for complex care, the need for us to deal with our prolific offenders, the need for us to deal with the opioid crisis, I think really is something that anybody who is looking at sitting in one of these chairs needs to be prepared for, and they need to be knowledgeable. They need to understand, and they need to do their homework going into the election about what, in fact, this issue is all about, how complex it is, and how many facets it has to it, and the partnerships that you may end up forging, and not necessarily with those that you think. Not necessarily just with BC Housing or the federal or provincial governments. There are nonprofit organizations, there are First Nations organizations, and that's a big piece of this, is that we bring into the conversation with the Lheidli on a fairly regular basis about the need for housing and the impact. We work very closely with our Friendship Center here in Prince George, which is one of the largest in Canada. So I think the multitude of things that are going to come at you is what you need to be prepared for, and it is a long, long list.
So much there. Mayor Helps, any advice?
Sure, thanks. I got an opportunity to think about it while Mayor Hall was giving his sage advice, and I guess there's three things I would say. The first is, do not underestimate the power of collaboration. And Lynn and I both have the pleasure of sitting as part of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus. And I really think without my colleagues, my 12 colleagues at that table, we would not be making some of the progress we are here in Victoria and collectively with the provincial government. And so at the beginning of the term, we didn't know each other at all. It was COVID that brought us together. And I think the BC Urban Mayors Caucus, and so obviously not everyone is going to be part of or wants to be part of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus, but find those people in your circles, other mayors, or if you're on council, other councillors who share a common vision and who can learn from each other, support each other. And really that has been so powerful, that collaboration. The second is kind of obvious, you'd think, although the world's going in the wrong direction. Hold hands rather than finger point. We've got hands, we can use them for a number of things. Finger pointing really gets you nowhere. It is really, really not very useful in a public session of a council meeting or in the media to criticize the federal or provincial governments. It really doesn't help. It's unnecessary, and there are other ways to have those conversations. So I think there's a real opportunity to shake hands and hold hands rather than finger point. And then I think the most important thing, and this is really the most difficult, because we're elected in political cycles, the structure is set up to win and lose elections. But the really important decisions that we're called to make in these offices are the ones that we should be looking out 50 years, not 4 years. And that takes political courage. It takes political courage to look at a room full of people who don't like something and say, I know you don't like this. I know you're protecting whatever your interest is in the present. Our job as government is to listen to that, to look at the present, but also to look at least 50 years ahead and say, what is the role of government to make sure that our cities and our towns are ready for the future? That takes political courage, and it's really difficult, but I think, that's what I would offer as advice.
This has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to Mayor Helps and Mayor Hall for joining us today on the podcast. Let's talk again soon.